Purina believes no one should have to make the impossible choice between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
Finish training for the day? Time to fight post-workout fatigue with Core Power Protein Shakes. They're packed with 26 grams of high-quality protein to build muscle and electrolytes to help hydrate. The nutrition you need to help your body replenish, rebuild, and repair post-workout so you can power on to the next one. Champion your recovery with Core Power. Visit corepower.com to learn more.
Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means. That's Stefan Krajisnik, and that is Andrew Gillis. And this is your official Ohio State-Minnesota game preview. Ohio State's first home Big Ten game of the season is against the Golden Gophers. It's also their only home game over the next month here because we're about to go on the road again. Shout out to Donkey from Shrek on the road again. I saw they had like an outdoor showing of Shrek a couple weeks ago, and me and my girlfriend went. It was awesome. I love Shrek. That's my favorite childhood movie. So anytime someone's like, "Hey, let's play Shrek," I'm with it.
You know, it's a good childhood movie. Like when you like watch it with your parents or like somebody like that, and they think it's funny too. I remember I saw that movie when I was a kid, and my dad, I thought was gonna pee his pants when they had the three blind mice like walking around. Like there are just, and there are also adult jokes in Shrek that are kind of hidden in there that are really good. Yeah, it's a good one.
I think that the thing about it is because we grew up with it, you appreciated it for one reason when you were a kid, and now that you're an adult, it's like you're rediscovering the movie all over again, and it's been amazing to watch. Like the Shrek 2 when they're talking about the white Bronco. Come on, man. What? That's elite level comedy. That when I was 4 years old, actually I was older, but when I was a kid, I probably didn't appreciate fully the same way. Just like I don't know if I fully have appreciated Ohio State's defense. And I think, Stefan, this Minnesota game will give me an opportunity to fully do that because they're going to try to run the ball and then toss it around the yard with Drake Lindsey. And on defense, Minnesota is going to try to stop you from running the ball. If all else fails, you will not run the ball on us. So here's my question, because that's my overwhelming thoughts on Minnesota. Where can Minnesota poke a hole at in Ohio State? Offense, defense, special, anywhere. What about Minnesota can poke a hole in what Ohio State is doing? And we're talking about this way because Ohio State's favored by 23.5 points.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to sound like a broken record just because there is kind of this one area that we still don't know about in Ohio State's defense, and it's at defensive tackle, and whether that be, Tywone Malone or Edric Houston or Jason Moore now that he's healthy, that is where teams are going to try to go after Ohio State in the rushing game, and we'll see. I mean, PJ Fleck said that we'll know 2 hours before the game whether Darius Taylor is playing or not. Regardless, I think Minnesota's a team that's going to rely on its running game and try to do some damage there. Ohio State's defense did a great job against Washington. That said, Jonah Coleman did, break a run or two and make some plays. I thought he actually looked pretty good in that game, all things considered. So I think Minnesota's going to try to go after that, and I think this is another test for not just Tywone Malone and his progression, but also Edric Houston and his involvement in this defense, and whether or not his playing time is going to increase moving forward, and he's going to become more of a factor in this. So I really hope Darius Taylor plays. I think it makes this game a bit more interesting, and he's, anytime you get an opportunity to watch one of the better players in the Big Ten, you want that to happen. You root for good health and all the players. So I'd love to see, Minnesota try to kind of go after Ohio State there to see how the Buckeyes respond, because they generally have been good in their response to teams, trying to exploit that. But this is another test. And I think when we talk about Minnesota, when we talk about Washington specifically in their running game, when we talk about Penn State in a few weeks in their running game, there's other teams on Ohio State's schedule that maybe can run the ball decently well, but those are probably the best examples. It's all leading up to how is Ohio State going to slow down Michigan at the end of the season, right? Because we know one team that's going to try to run the ball effectively, and that's the team that has Haynes and Underwood in their backfield. So this is another test kind of towards that, and that's what I'm going to be watching. Regardless of who's in the backfield for Minnesota, can they kind of go after that defensive tackle spot and do some damage, or will we see some progression from the guy playing alongside Caden McDonald?
If Darius Taylor doesn't play, Andrew, does that change the math for you in terms of how much of an impact Minnesota can have trying to run the ball out on Ohio State?
Yeah, I think so. The guy who's taken his place, I mean, they have very similar stats, 35 carries to 173, 33 carries for Darius Taylor, 161. It's 2 carries of a difference and 12 yards. They're both averaging 4.9 yards a carry. Statistically, it doesn't look like that much of a difference from 1 to 2.
Mm-hmm.
There is. Like, I mean, if you were to ask me, the 5 best running backs in college football, like Darius Taylor might be on that list. Like Jonah Coleman's probably on that list. So Ohio State just kind of dealt with that. So I think that might be a good test. Jonah Coleman might be on that top 5. Jeremiah Love's on that 5. Maybe one of the Penn State guys. But
I think Justice Haynes before I take one.
Oh, Justice Haynes. Yeah, Justice Haynes is definitely on that list. So like Ohio State's gonna have running tests like this down the line, but like Darius Taylor is really, really good. Even if he does play, you wonder, how effective he's going to be able to be. They have used him a lot. He had 205 carries last year. So, we'll see. The season opener against Buffalo where they, kind of needed him. He carried the ball 30 times and then had 4 catches, when they played Northwest State, and that game ended in like the third quarter because both teams were like, you know what, there's a weather delay. Let's just go home. He had 3 carries. So he hasn't really done a ton this year, except for that game against Buffalo. But he definitely does change the math because like this is a player who, you could make a really good case should leave for the NFL after this year.
I love that. Listen, this game is out of hand and it's raining. What if we all just went home? I like that. We need more of that in college football. We need more. Well, I mean, that would require Mother Nature to always intervene, right? Like if it were raining at the end of the third quarter when Ohio State played Grambling, if both of the coaches looked at each other and said, listen,
there should be a certain score for running clocks.
I think if you are up by 50 with less than 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, let that thing run.
Here's the problem. Ohio State versus Grambling State, that's still commercials.
I was going to say, how will they get their ad money?
No, okay, they just play them. You know how they do the picture in the picture sometimes? Just have the commercial.
Maybe
in the picture.
Maybe you have a private equity that makes up that money for you.
Or the 2 teams who don't need the private equity can say no. Oh wait, they did that in real life. I don't want to talk about private equity.
They haven't said no. They haven't said no. Not yet.
They haven't said yes.
They haven't said yes. But everyone else.
The other 16 teams emphatically said yes, and then there's 2 teams who are like, how does this help me? Because I keep doing things to help the team. But how is it? They're being AJ Brown. And they're right, just like AJ Brown is. Give me the ball. Give me more money. Anyway, speaking of teams who said yes, Minnesota, 23.5-point favorite is what Ohio State is. And I don't want to dismiss Minnesota. I think Drake Lindsey is a very good quarterback, and I think there is a chance that he validates my feelings that when we did our list of quarterbacks who I think could outplay Julian Sand, I had him high on my list. I feel more confident about that, but I also know that this might be the first time that Julian Sand is playing a quality quarterback where he is going to be able to throw haymakers just as often as the quarterback on the other sideline has the opportunities to throw haymakers because I feel like, Stefan, they're going to let it loose and they're going to let it fly. And some of this might just be because of how Minnesota plays defense, but it's also we haven't seen Julian Sand do this against a quality opponent yet. We've seen him do it against Grambling in Ohio, and this feels like if you're going to do it in October, you're going to do it at home versus trying to do it on the road against Wisconsin and Illinois. This would be the week to establish that for Julian Sand.
I agree, and when we did our videos this week talking about this game, I alluded to that too, of this idea of this is the perfect environment and the perfect opponent for Ohio State to air it out a bit. I will say, though, the more I thought about it, like, do we really think Minnesota's defense isn't going to place a good amount of 2 deep? Like, just because they've loaded the box against Rutgers and Buffalo and Cal, you don't think they're going to do what everyone else does against Ohio State?
I think they'll be more diverse than they've been, because this is also the first time they're playing a team where you have to respect the passing game. Yes, I do agree with you. I just don't think they have the weapons to. It's gonna. I thought Washington at least had the personnel to where if they played a lot more zone than we thought they were going to play, especially with two of their top corners down, they could still execute it. I'm not sure Minnesota, I think part of the reason why they sell out on stopping the run is because they can't really stop the pass against a sophisticated passing attack. So yes, do I expect to see more two high safeties where they're 16 yards off the line of scrimmage? Yeah, sure. I just expect Ohio State to go. So anyway.
Right. And that is where I come back to of you this is what teams are going to do against you all season. At some point you're going to have to air it out, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's against Minnesota running some too deep on Saturday or Ole Miss running some too deep on January 1st in the Rose Bowl or something like that, right? Like at some point your passing game is going to have to get going regardless of what the defense is throwing your way, just because of how Ohio State is structured. So I think regardless of what Minnesota does, yeah, I think I'm with you that Ohio State's going to try to air it out and say, all right, Julian, you're going to see a lot of this down the road, and we're going to need you to make these throws anyways. So let's do some things. Let's let this offense look like what it looked like in the second half of that Washington game and throw in some explosives. You know, Ryan Day has mentioned the stat a few times this week of Ohio State having, I think, 16 plays go 10-plus yards against Washington. Okay, yeah, I'd like to see a lot of that be air yards. I'd like to see them air it out a bit, and I think Minnesota probably presents an opportunity to do so. Like, Jeremiah Smith's touchdown did go 10-plus yards. It was also thrown behind the line of scrimmage, right? So it's like there's obviously different ways to do this, but I'd like to see them challenge Julian Sand a bit more, knowing that if he makes a mistake, he's at home, and it's a team that you're not going to lose to, so you could take some more risks. And you know, obviously Minnesota's better than Ohio or Grambling. But that said, those are games where you didn't have to risk losing, and you could kind of take some chances with Julian Sand. And this game, even with a Big Ten opponent, I think is in a similar vein.
Andrew, winning and losing is obviously the ultimate success failure. We know that. So, but that's not what Ohio State's chasing. They're not just trying to. Their entire season doesn't rest on beating Minnesota. It's a stepping stone to where they want to get to. What does success on Saturday look like for Ohio State? And then what does failure look like for Ohio State? I know those are harsh words, but what does we accomplish what they needed to accomplish this week versus they didn't accomplish what they needed to accomplish this week?
I think I'm going to sound like Ryan Day for a minute. I think it's situational. I think they need to have success in the red zone. You know, you can't kind of get turned away at the red zone like you have been in these last couple of games. You know, I think that is probably the number one area that I would, you know, probably point to for Ohio State and say, you know, start to clean this up, because, you know, there's a Simpsons gif that somebody made where it's, you know, they're all walking in a conga line, but the hashtag is you don't win games with field goals. And that's true. And you don't win games with field goals. And I really do think that, you know, that is going to bite them in the butt if they don't clean it up by November, December, January. So, you know, success in the red zone. We talked about, you know, the 75% mark of scoring touchdowns and, you know, whether that's attainable or not. But you have to have success in the red zone, I think, number one. I think success looks like special team success. You know, there's no turnovers. You know, Minnesota doesn't break any runs. There's no quote unquote lost yardage there. You know, it's a very situational game for me because, you know, like we talked about Ohio State's multi-score favorites. This game should not come down to the fourth quarter. In which case, if it does, like I don't think this is just a, you know what, let's tip our hat to Minnesota. They're really, really good and they're better than we think. And maybe they're a low-key, like this isn't like they're a low-key playoff team. It's like, no. Minnesota's not that great. Like Minnesota is not a playoff team. Minnesota's like a 7-win team. And Ohio State just didn't play to their standard. So if this game is in the fourth quarter, obviously that's a failure. But those are the two areas that I would kind of lean in on and just say, like, you have to accomplish the things that you have been plagued by. Because if you're not doing them against Ohio, like if you can't score in the red zone against the Bobcats, which, like, again, Bobcats, tough out. But if you can't score in the red zone against them, if you're having special teams failures against Washington, what's going to happen when you play Penn State? And what's going to happen when you play Michigan? And what's going to happen if you play Oregon in the Big Ten title game and in the college football playoff? So, yeah, the situational spots are big for me.
Minnesota is 15th in the Big Ten in opponent red zone conversions. 70% of their opponents' red zone trips ended touchdowns. So Minnesota is better. Minnesota gives Ohio State's red zone conversion from touchdowns is 65% right now. So this is a situation, Stefan, where like legitimately you're playing a team who is not good at keeping teams out of the end zone once they get to the red zone. You are not good at getting to the end zone from the red zone. Something has to give.
Something's got to give.
It's a stoppable object meeting a movable force. I love when that thing happens. Hey, we're not good at this. Hey, we're not good at this either. So somebody's got to be good at this on Saturday.
Yeah, someone's got to execute. And I lean toward it being Ohio State.
But you're not confident.
But I can't unsee some of these red zone trips, you know?
I think the thing about Ohio State's red zone, in all seriousness, is Ryan Day said a lot of it was execution. A lot of it is like small stuff, right? It's not some overwhelming issue that Ohio State has here, right? It's runs not being executed in terms of some of the blocks. It's Tegra Shabola's had a couple of blocks. I think Phillip Daniels had a holding penalty in there as well, right? Julian Sand missing some reads, right? It's stuff that's fixable. Minnesota's, if I was covering Minnesota, I'm wondering if you would be thinking, okay, the red zone defense is fixable or not. And it doesn't seem, I don't know, I'm not sure whether that's true or not. I think Ohio State's red zone issues are fixable. The problem is you're running out of time to fix them before it becomes who you are as a team, because you're only going to get deeper and deeper into Big Ten play. Last thing on the red zone. Do you know how many teams in the country right now, Andrew, have not allowed a touchdown in the red zone?
That is a good question. Have not allowed a touchdown in the red zone?
A single touchdown in the red zone. What's your guess?
Ohio State's one.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Ohio State. I'm just going to say it's one. I don't know. I don't have another guess.
What's your guess?
I was going to just say Ohio State.
Yeah, it's literally just Ohio State. Ohio State has had 7 red zone trips from its opponents. They've given up 2 field goals. Both of those field goals happened Saturday. No touchdowns. The second best, Indiana, who's given up 1 touchdown and 3 red zone trips, which is hilarious. Teams don't even get to the red zone in Indiana, and they played a top 10 opponent at some point this year. Maryland, 10 red zone trips, only 2 touchdowns. So the top 3 are Big Ten teams, and even Nebraska, who's tied for third, 4 red zone trips, only 2 touchdowns. The other teams who are like tied for third or higher, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Louisiana Tech. So it's a lot of Big Ten teams because the Big Ten plays defense. But they haven't given up a red zone touchdown yet in 7 tries.
Maybe it's because Ohio State still calls it the red zone. Haven't teams like started calling it like scoring territory or like red area or like green area, gold zone?
And if red means stop.
Just call it the red zone, and you won't give up any touchdowns.
That's true, but I think the offense should call it the scoring zone, because then they'll score.
Yeah, the offense needs to call it something different because it's not working. The defense needs. Yeah, Patricia can call it the red zone. Brian Hartline, until further notice, you cannot call it the red zone.
Yeah, find something. Call it the JJ zone.
That's the goal line to the goal line.
That's fair. That's when he walks in the building. As soon as they come down the ramp and many minutes playing, you're in the JJ zone. That's a fair point. So I think we talked it through. Is there anything else people want to mention? Because I think that's talking this through. It's Ohio State has some things to work on, and they're playing an opponent this week that gives them the perfect chance to work on those things. So if you can't do it against this team, then maybe you're just not meant to be able to do it this year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys, like, Ohio State has a 4-game stretch from non-conference play to Penn State. And I think we've all kind of like laughed at that Penn State game of like, we know what's going to happen there. But I think we know what's going to happen there, not in the way of Ohio State's going to win and they're going to kill Penn State. It's like, Ohio State's going to win in an agonizing fashion for Penn State, and they're going to win by 10 points, and Penn State's going to be so close, and then they're going to do the same old song and dance over again, where it was a 3-point game in the fourth quarter, and then Ohio State slams the door. But that is a game that is a matchup game, and it is a big game, and it's going to be a top 10 game, and blah, blah, blah. Washington, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin. Where would you put Minnesota in that group of 4? I think we're all putting Wisconsin 4th.
3rd.
I think I'm there too, and that I think is why I'm honing in on some of these issues. Is like, if you can't do it now, you just played a better team in Washington. Like, what gives me confidence you're going to do it against Penn State or Michigan?
Well, let me say too, like on the Penn State front, like, yeah, I agree with you. If we were all predicting the game right now, we'd pick Ohio State to win. And frankly, when we predict the game that week, we're going to pick Ohio State to win because it's Penn State. Oregon was 3 touchdowns on 3 red zone trips against Penn State. And that Oregon's got an explosive offense as well, right? They can air it out in the same way that Ohio State does. They had to be pristine in the red zone to win that game. That's a game that went into double overtime. Like, they had to be perfect in the red zone with touchdowns to win that game. So if you're painting this path of how can Penn State make it a game, it's holding Ohio State to field goals. What Ohio State has done in the red zone and settled for the field goals that they've settled for, that works against Washington and Grambling and Ohio, where you can win those games. But I think back to that Ohio game, Ohio makes it they made it 13-9. Ohio makes it 13-9. Bo Jackson breaks that big run, but then Ohio State settles for a field goal. And it's 16-9. And if it's 16-9 against Penn State, you've accomplished nothing. You've kept it at a one possession game. Like that stuff matters against the Penn States of the world. That's how Penn State makes it a game of suddenly, Penn State gave up this big play, yet they held Ohio State to 3 points. Like that's how that Penn State game becomes a game. That's why we are all looking at this Minnesota game saying, hey, this red zone offense better get better, because Michigan and Penn State and Oregon and Indianapolis and Ole Miss and I'm trying to, like, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, these teams that have good defenses that you could see in the college football playoff, this is all going to matter.
And it's third because this is the home game, and then they're the third best team of the group. It's even if all four of these games are on the road, I would say that this is third, because Minnesota's they're a fine football team, but again, they are weak at where Ohio State needs to get better at. And if you can't do it in this game, then it's not just something we're being nitpicky about. It is now a problem. And to both of you guys' point, it's like, okay, being up 16-10 against Ohio is one thing. Being up 16-10 against Penn State is a whole different thing, even if we know how that game is going to eventually end. So there's that. Let's take a break.
Is there any world in which the areas where Penn State is weak and Ohio State needs to get better, Minnesota's weak and Ohio State needs to get better, that Minnesota wins? What if Minnesota's red zone defense outplays Ohio State's red zone offense? Is there any way this game is close?
No, I just think it means that we're in for a 4-quarter game. I don't think that we're going to see a second string quarterback regardless, but I think it's the difference between me picking Ohio State to win this game, I don't know, like 37-6 versus winning this game 24-10.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the closest that I think we get to Minnesota winning is, Ohio State's winning 10-7 at halftime.
But also Ohio State gave away the ball.
Yeah.
Even like you think about it, Brandon Ennis gave away one possession in a game where Ohio State had 6 possessions in it.
Mm-hmm.
But because the defense only gave up 6 points, only having 6 possessions doesn't hurt you. The Minnesota winning part turns into a fumble, an interception, bad penalty, so they have to settle for a field goal. But then, all of a sudden, this defense is turned into something it hasn't been for 4 games already, where they're giving up explosives all over the place. Drake Lindsay makes a statement that's like, hey, I'm going to be a future number 1 pick in the NFL. Right? I think everything we're pointing out right now is an offensive problem. There would have to be defensive problems that we have been drastically overlooking for a month for Minnesota to win this game.
And Minnesota is 91st or tied for 91st in red zone offensive conversions. Those are conversions and drives that turn into points. They're tied with Boston College, and for note, they're tied for 91st. There are 136 college football teams. That's bad.
So that's a stoppable object meeting a immovable force.
Yeah, and they're actually even slightly worse on touchdown percentage. They're at 57.14%, which is tied for 94th in college football. So Minnesota's red zone offense is really hideous. Especially when you consider that they have played Buffalo, Northwest State, Cal, and Rutgers. It's a MAC team, an FCS team. And I know they beat the snot out of Northwest State, but like that Buffalo game was 23-10, and that was a game longer than it should have been. I think it was actually tied, or it was a close game in the second half, where Buffalo was kind of hanging around. So, I don't imagine there's a scenario like that, Stefan, to answer your question. Like, I think, like I said, I think the closest we get is Minnesota pops one, or it's 10-3 because Ohio State, they turn it over on downs and then they commit a penalty and all of a sudden it's 1st and 20 and they don't convert, something like that. And then we go into halftime and it's 10-3 and we're like, Ohio State's kind of playing with their food here a little bit. And then they win that game by 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Before we take a break, I originally didn't do this, and we're going to take a break, so I'll think about it some more. Does anybody have Ohio State shutting out Minnesota as their score?
Maybe.
We'll discuss that more after the break here.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
This episode is brought to you by Nature's Bounty. Nature's Bounty believes your body is brilliant, naturally designed to thrive, inside and out. For those always looking for new ways to support your health from head to heels, Nature's Bounty has a range of over 400 vitamins and supplements born from 50 years of trust and care. Nature's Bounty. It's in your nature. Visit naturesbounty.com to learn more.
Ohio State returns to Ohio Stadium for its only home game of October in a matchup against Minnesota for its second Big Ten game of the season as a 23.5-point favorite. I'm Stephen, that's Stefan, and that's Andrew, and these are our game scores. Stefan, you teased this for people who are listening to this through Buckeye Talk. If not, go listen to Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts, that maybe you were picking Ohio State to shut out the Golden Gophers. Is that maybe a yes or a no? What's your game score?
The answer is a no. I'm going Ohio State wins 35-3. I respect Drake Lindsey and this Minnesota offense enough to think that maybe they put a drive together to get points on the board, or maybe Ohio State makes a mistake and Minnesota gets the ball in plus territory and they can get some points on the board. But I don't think this is a game where we see Ohio State give up a touchdown. I think they'll stay perfect in terms of red zone defense and allowing no touchdowns. And I think if my math is right, they've only given up 2 touchdowns on the season total. One to Texas on a passing play from outside the red zone, and one to Ohio, the big play down the middle of the field. So I think this Ohio State offense has an opportunity to kind of throw it around a bit more and look better than they did against Washington or Texas earlier this year. I think they're going to be a bit more aggressive in the passing game, and I think they're going to be a bit more aggressive in the red zone. The reason I'm going with 35 is because I don't think Ryan Day is going to settle for field goals in this game. I think that he knows he can take some risks and take some chances. So if there's 4th and 2, 4th and 3, maybe even 4th, 5, 6, situations in plus territory, I think Ohio State's going to go for it. I think they're going to be aggressive and say, hey, we got to get this red zone offense going. We've talked all week about the goal being 75%. Sure, that's a lofty goal in terms of touchdown percentage from red zone drives, but it's what they strive for. Now, if you end up at 70 for the season, you can live with that, right? They're at 65 right now, though, and they want to be at least a touch above that. So I think Ohio State's going to be aggressive and try to iron out some wrinkles that it has, specifically with the red zone offense. And I think they'll be successful. We talked about it on Buckeye Talk, the struggles to this Minnesota red zone defense. It's something's got to give here, and I think Ohio State's going to be the team that succeeds. So I got the Buckeyes 35, the Golden Gophers 3. I think it's going to be a long night at Ohio Stadium for PJ Fleck and company.
We have the same point total. We just divvied it out a little bit differently because I am going to pick Ohio State to shut out Minnesota. And I wasn't going to do it. My original game score was going to be 38-3. And then we spent 20 minutes talking about Minnesota and talking it through and coming to some realizations of where Minnesota struggles, Ohio State is dominant defensively. And they're great a lot of different places, but especially where Minnesota struggles, Ohio State is dominant. I don't think Drake Lindsey just doesn't have the weapons. PJ Fleck and Minnesota just don't have the weapons to be able to just pull off explosive plays. And you can't bank on what Ohio was able to pull off on that 67-yard touchdown where 2 guys just have a mind blip for a second, and so they get a 67-yard touchdown pass out of that. If you take that away, Ohio got a field goal out of the game on one quality drive. Minnesota gets quality drives, but they don't finish in the red zone. Ohio State has allowed 7 red zone trips all year, and they're the only team in the country who hasn't allowed a touchdown, and they didn't even give up field goals until last game. So I just talking it through, I'm finding it difficult for where Minnesota scores. Ohio State had 2 shutouts last year. They had one early in the year against Western Michigan, and they had one during the Big Ten schedule against Purdue at home. I think we see a similar situation this year where they already have one shutout against Grambling earlier in the year. I think if they're going to shut out an opponent at home this year, more than likely Minnesota has the best case of that. Maybe UCLA later down the road, but like right now, of the teams they're playing this month, I think they might shut out Minnesota simply because where Ohio State is dominant, Minnesota is very terrible. And then where Ohio State is just good, elite, very good, Minnesota is below average at best. I just think this is a product of stoppable object, immovable force. And as a result, the defense gives up no scores. And I'm with you, Stefan. I think they're going to air it out this game. I think they're going to get in the end zone a lot. I just think there might be one drive in this game where situationally it ends in a field goal. Maybe it's 2-minute drill and you get down to the 17-yard line and there's 3 seconds on the clock, so you're kicking it with Jaden Fielding. Or early in the game, they're driving, and as we've seen the last couple of games where they're just not executing fully, so it ends in a field goal, or late in the game, it ends in a field goal. But my score, 38-0. Ohio State gets its fourth shutout in the last 2 years. Andrew, what's your game score?
Going a barn burner. 38-6. I don't think Minnesota's going to score a touchdown either. So I think what Stefan had 3 for Minnesota, I had 6, and Steven had 0. So we basically don't think Minnesota's going to score a touchdown. I think that's about right. If you remember the 23 game, Ohio State was up 37-0, and Minnesota kicked a field goal late. I think we're probably in for one of those where it's like, hey, Minnesota has one early, and then all of a sudden, they kick a field goal late, and all of a sudden they ruin a shutout, or they ruin, a 3-point performance or something like that. But yeah, this to me, I don't see a path for Minnesota really to keep it super close into the second half without some Ohio State errors. I look at this Ohio State defense and how awesome they are and how awesome they've been. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not there with Minnesota's running game, especially if Darius Taylor's out. You guys, I think, are higher than me on Drake Lindsey. You guys are, really high on what he can be. I don't think you're wrong. I just think you're maybe early. I'm not there right now. I don't think that Lindsey is all that great right now. I think maybe let's have this conversation in 26 or 27, and we can be talking about Drake Lindsey as that type of guy that can, poke some holes in Ohio State's defense. I just don't think we're there yet. I think he's going to be overwhelmed. I think Minnesota's running game is going to be overwhelmed. And we talked about it. Their red zone defense is not great. The red zone offense is even worse. I don't think that Minnesota has the goods to kind of keep this close. They're a Big Ten team. I think they'll score a little bit. I think they'll kick 2 field goals. They'll be able to get on the board. They won't get shut out. But yeah, this is going to be one of those games, I think, where, you can kind of look at it, even if the game is 14-0 in the second quarter or at halftime or something like that, and go, yeah, this one's over. Yeah, it just, this doesn't strike me as a close game. So Ohio State 38, Minnesota 6.
So we all have Ohio State covering, but we all also have the under. Andrew, you correctly picked the under last week, but you barely under last week. But kudos to you. You were under.
A win's a win, Steven.
Yeah, win's a win, man. The object is to win the game. Style points don't matter. Are we starting to all overcorrect now that we're seeing how Ohio State is handling games? And is that how we have all reached a point where we're all picking the under? And Andrew, you are a half point under. So we're all just kind of stretching it. But under is under, right? Have we all maybe adjusted our opinions and our perceptions on what this offense is going to do on a week-in, week-out basis, not because of what it's capable of doing, but what they feel and deem is necessary to do to win a football game? I think partially because of the offensive thing, but I also am looking at Ohio State's defense too, and I'm going, okay, if the over-under in this game is 44.5 right now, how much of that is Ohio State going to have to account for, right? I think in a normal defense, if you were to say, oh, this team, you could just give them a touchdown and a field goal, and that seems about right for what Ohio State to give up over the course of 8 or 9 possessions. And then you can probably kind of talk yourself into some overs, but I don't think Minnesota's going to score, and I don't know how many other defenses are going to score on this team. So I think it's a product of the offense, but I also just think it's a product of the defense being so good that, teams know they have to score some points to beat Ohio State. I think Ohio State's offense would have to account for the majority of it. So I bet the under in a little bit.
Yeah, I think too, when we talk about Ohio State airing it out, I'm still a bit hesitant to think that, there's a full game where they just load up and they put up a 50 spot, a 60 spot against a Big Ten team. To me, air it out seems like take the Washington game, add a couple possessions and a couple possessions where they're a bit more aggressive. But I think once Ohio State gets out to a big enough lead, you'll probably see them pump the brakes a little bit and maybe conserve their bodies a bit and go back to the long-term approach that we've seen Ryan Day and the staff lean on a bit. So even when I say air it out, I will struggle with this offense because of their approach to go past, like 42 or 49 points scored in a Big Ten game. And I will say against Washington, I predict that Washington will score 21 points. I will not be doing that I will not be doing that often the rest of the season is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's going to be a while before I predict the team to score multiple touchdowns on Ohio State's defense when scoring one touchdown seems
my brain broke trying to talk about Ohio State's defense there. I can't imagine what it's like for an offensive coordinator going up against Ohio State's defense.
I think I'm going to be sticking with unders for a little bit, especially when they're around the 40 to 50 range, simply because, as you said, Andrew, how much of that is Ohio State going to account for? It's how many points does Ohio State have to score to win the football game, right? Like, and it doesn't seem like they have to score a lot to win football games right now because of how good their defense is. They scored 14 points against Texas and won that game. They scored 24 points in 6 possessions, and they beat Washington, right? Do I think they need to score 45-plus points to beat Minnesota? Probably not. Do I think they need to score 45 points to beat Illinois or Wisconsin? Probably not. In fact, I don't think there's a game on the schedule left where I think they have to score more than 40 points to win the football game. Now, getting to the Big Ten championship game, you're playing Indiana or you're playing Oregon, especially Oregon, who's got the weapons on the perimeter to keep up with you, that's a different conversation. But I don't think there's a team on the schedule anymore where, even if I think Ohio State could go out there and put 45 on anybody's head, do they need to? And if the answer is no, then they're not going to do that. And as a result, we're all taking the under. Get the text 614-350. It's a 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. Those are our game scores. We're all picking Ohio State to cover, but also taking the under against Minnesota on Saturday night inside the shoe. If you're watching on YouTube, go check out the full podcast. Go wherever you find podcasts. Just look for Buckeye Talk. After the break, we're going to talk about some games around the country here on Buckeye.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Membership means more with American Express Business Gold. Earn 4 times membership rewards points in your top 2 eligible spending categories every month, including eligible U.S. advertising purchases and select media, and U.S. purchases at restaurants, including takeout and delivery. What are you waiting for? Get the card that flexes with your spending every month. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold Card. Built for business by American Express.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis wrapping up our Ohio State Minnesota game preview with a look around the country, a look around the Big Ten. And we're not necessarily doing games this week. We were just talking about this during the break, this idea of college football has this thing where they always have these awesome weeks and they followed up with weeks that are maybe more duds, and maybe they need to alter that with some of these schedules and making sure every week has multiple games that people want to be able to tune into. So instead of doing games, we're going to do a team. And it's a non-Michigan thing because you should pay attention to Wisconsin and Michigan at noon because your favorite team hates that school. So that's a given in that situation that you want to watch that. But if there's any other team around the country who's playing in a game that Ohio State fans should be aware of and pay attention to while they're waiting on Ohio State, Minnesota to start on NBC at 7:30 on Saturday night. Gillis, you first. What team should Ohio State fans be intrigued by this weekend?
This is early in the process. I'm getting ahead of this one just in case. The Maryland Terrapins host.
That's a great pick, man.
They host Washington, and I pulled up their schedule. Do you know who Maryland played last week? Nobody. They beat the snot out of Wisconsin with a potential superstar quarterback. They have a bye week. They come home. Washington, traveling across the country after playing Ohio State, plays at Maryland as 6.5-point dogs. Maryland, their schedule the rest of the way is not nuts. And I'm just saying this because if they lose to Washington, the dream's dead. But they play Nebraska next week at home. And then they go to UCLA on the road. But Maryland right now, with the way that Malik Washington is playing, is looking at all 3 of those games. Especially, the UCLA game, they're going to win that one. But they're looking at these next 2 games, going, we should win these games. And then you have a bye week. You come home and play Indiana. You go on the road to Rutgers. You go on the road to Illinois. You host Michigan. You go to Michigan State. Like Maryland finishing 10-2 if they beat Washington is not insane. Because if you because for two reasons, not just like the schedule, but if you beat Washington, you kind of prove to me like, hey, maybe the talent that Mike Locksley had at Maryland is finally coming together because you got a quarterback who's really good. Like the one-time Ohio State commit, Zahir Mathis, is starting on Maryland's defensive line. I'm looking at I mean, like, and again for Washington, it is an interesting, look. All right, you just played them. How do they play? They got to play Michigan later. They got to play Oregon later. Is Washington a team that is their dream dead now, or are they a legitimate playoff team? Maryland going 10-2 in the playoff with Maryland going 10-2 and being a factor in the playoff. If they beat Washington, not out of the question. I'm keeping an eye on the turtle this weekend. I'm keeping an eye on what's going to happen in College Park, Maryland, because could this end in a 7-5 year for Maryland? You could convince me of that. But they also have not had a quarterback like Malik Washington. And if he ends up really, really good, Maryland is a legitimate playoff contender, and they are this year's Indiana.
I think the favorites right now to win Big Ten Freshman of the Year are probably Bryce Underwood, Julian Sand, though I don't think that redshirt freshmen should be eligible for the award, but they are. So Julian Sand is probably in that mix, and Malik Washington. And I think if I had to bet on somebody winning it right now, it'd be Malik Washington winning that award. He is. I don't know how good Maryland is, but I do think they can Indiana this thing. And I don't know if that means making the college football playoff, but they have a decent enough and favorable enough schedule to go 10-2, 11-1 very, very seamlessly here. And it's because, in fact, if Washington had beaten Ohio State on Saturday, I'd be picking Maryland to win this game because they would have to be traveling across the country and they would be trying to come down from the high of the biggest win since they joined the Big Ten of. Actually, you know what? Even if probably the biggest win in the last like 4 or 5 years for a Washington team who played in a national championship, mainly because of the context around that. The reason you got to the national championship game is he's not there anymore. This is a new program. That's what we have to remember. They lost that head coach to Alabama. They lost that quarterback to the NFL. They lost that wide receiver coach to the NFL. This is a team trying to pick itself up off the ground after what was the greatest season for Washington in a long time, and every single reason for why that season happened walked out the door, and every reason for why it was going to be sustained also walked out of the door. So if they would have pulled off that upset in Jetfish in year 2, is like, no, we're right back on the saddle. We're right back into this thing. That could have done wonders for Jetfish's program at Washington. And then you're supposed to come down off of that high and travel to the other side of the country? We just did it. Were we all not tired Sunday when we got back?
I was tired Tuesday.
And we didn't play football. We just watched people play football. So I'd be picking Maryland to win this game. In fact, 6.5.
6.5 is interesting. Smelly smell, that kind of smells smelly.
I might make me some money this weekend.
And just as another point, you know when they play Michigan? The week before the Ohio State-Michigan game. It's in College Park, Maryland. Just throwing it out there.
Pull up the old DraftKings here. See what happens there. But that's a great pick, Maryland. Stefan, what team are you want to watch this weekend? What's an interesting game?
Yeah, I like that Maryland pick too. I like this Maryland team a lot. One of their bigger games that if Maryland is going to be a playoff team or be this year's version of Indiana is they play Indiana the week before the Hoosiers play at Penn State. So like that's a crap game opportunity. Like they got a chance to get a statement win on their resume too if they can pull something off. So yeah, I like this Maryland team. I'm keeping an eye on Alabama. Alabama Vanderbilt is probably like the second best game of the weekend after Miami Florida State. The reason I'm keeping an eye on Alabama is I can't remember if I said on the pod or just talking to you guys during our travels last week. Alabama beating Georgia did not tell me anything about Kalen DeBoer's program. Alabama beats Georgia. First of all, that's what they do. That's Kirby Smart. Alabama to Kirby Smart is now what Michigan is to Ryan Day. Like it's officially a mental thing. And on top of that, Kalen DeBoer beat Georgia last year. Kalen DeBoer's issue at Alabama was not getting his team up for the big games. It was the home game where they struggled against South Carolina, the game at Vanderbilt, the game against a horrible Oklahoma team last year that they lost. This game will tell me where Alabama has come as a program under Kalen DeBoer, right? They lose week 1 to Florida State, and it's not a good look, and you start 0-1. You've bounced back. You put yourself back in a firm spot where you can be Alabama. You can finish as one of the top 4 seeds this year. You can win the SEC. You can win a national championship. You have a loaded roster. Ty Simpson's looking the part. Grubb is back with DeBoer calling plays or helping run that offense. Like everything is now back in place for Alabama to be what we thought they could be with Kalen DeBoer replacing Nick Saban. If you lose at Vanderbilt, that's all out the window, and Kalen DeBoer can't get this team up for a non-big game. And, I know Vanderbilt's ranked, and technically it's a big game. In terms of programs and where they are, like this is Vanderbilt playing Alabama should still be Indiana playing Ohio State, where Indiana's a great team. They're not ready to compete with the Ohio States of the world. Vanderbilt's a great team. They should not be competing with Alabama. And if you're Kalen DeBoer and you do what you're supposed to do against Vanderbilt, I might start buying into this program thinking, okay, he's getting his message across. His guys are showing up even when it's not a big game. And for the love of God, Kalen DeBoer, don't show up just wearing a T-shirt again to coach this game and making it seem like you could care less about Vanderbilt. Treat Vanderbilt with respect. Show your players that you treat Vanderbilt with respect, and maybe they'll play that way accordingly. So I'm keeping an eye on Alabama because I think they might still be the best team to come out of the SEC this year if DeBoer can get them to show up consistently instead of just showing up for the big games. Because if they just show up for the big games, they're not going to make the playoff, and it's not going to matter. He's got to get them to show up for a meaningless bowl game against Michigan, a game against a bad Oklahoma team, a game against Vanderbilt, a home game against South Carolina. That's the games that he's got to get his program ready for that they were not ready for last year. So cautiously optimistic about Bama. If they can just beat the hell out of Vanderbilt this weekend, I might start to buy in. So we'll see. Also, by the way, we talk about dress to impress. Day on his radio show again wore like a full button-up shirt. I think PJ Fleck might be influencing Ryan Day's attire for this week.
That's pretty funny.
You don't think Ryan's going to come out with the chest out on Saturday?
I think if Ryan Day shows up full suit, handkerchief in the pocket, like folded up like in that fancy way, and the shirt buttoned down like right below his chest, I think Ohio State might win by 70.
That'd be like, I remember Fleck did an interview.
I might pick Ohio State to beat Michigan right then and there.
Well, I remember Fleck did an interview one time where he was just like, I mean, that guy's like a legitimate psycho, and I mean that in a very positive way. But like, he did an interview one time. He's like, people dress up to go to church. People dress up to do this. People dress up. Blah, blah, blah. Why would I not dress up to do this? And like, he pointed to like old coaches that used to wear like suits and ties on the sideline, which like, honestly, really good bit by Ryan Day if he were to do that. Like, I really hope he's doing that. Oh God, that'd be so funny. Just to your Alabama point really quickly, we could think about Alabama. What is that? I think that game is at 3:30. Yeah. We could think about that game. So we could think about that Alabama team so differently at 11 o'clock if like Florida State beats Miami and Alabama beats the snot out of Vanderbilt and they win that game by 2 touchdowns and Florida State wins at home against Miami. And then it's like, okay, well, maybe that Florida State game against Virginia was just like, they had a bad game against a team that's decent and Florida State's actually pretty good. And then Alabama's one loss. You're looking at it going like, maybe this isn't as bad as we thought.
Is Penn State good?
Yes, because they're a top 10 team.
Are they good though?
Yeah, top 10 teams are good.
I know you're being facetious, but
no, I'm not. Like, I'm actually not. They are a good team. They're gonna beat everybody else on their schedule, maybe with the exception of Indiana.
Sure. Are they good though? And what's the data point that proves they're good?
I don't know if it's like. I mean,
they went to double overtime with the second best team in the country.
Yeah, like that's
lost.
Their data point's a loss. Yeah.
Okay.
But
so like, that's the SEC thing of like good loss. You lost.
Yeah, but
you lost. You lost.
Yeah, but I'm also not going to pretend that Penn State's like not like a top 25 team.
I don't.
Yeah, but where like that's what I'm saying.
I didn't say that. I didn't say were they top 25, were they top 10, were they top 15. You have to rank. You have to rank 25 teams every week. Right. That doesn't mean all 25 teams are good.
Yeah, I think Penn State's good. I think their defense is good. Like they really didn't give up a ton of points, and I mean really until like overtime. Like it was, I think it was a game go to 17-17 at overtime, and like we can't talk about how explosive Oregon's offense is and how talented Oregon's offense is when that game went to overtime at 17-17, and like if somebody cuts the grass an eighth of an inch lower in Happy Valley, Penn State doesn't allow a touchdown on like the next play when Oregon scored. So like yeah, Penn State's a good team, but like we don't have to pretend that like they aren't. You know what they are what they are. Like they're a good team with a lot of talent who's going to lose by a touchdown or less to other top 10 teams.
Yeah, that's kind of the Penn State way.
Yeah,
I think
I don't know.
I think Penn State is what Penn State is,
and what is that?
What they always have been.
And that is
good, not
okay.
elite. So if you're asking me if they're good, yeah, they're good. If you're asking me, are they a national title contender right now? I'd probably say no.
So they play UCLA this weekend at 3:30 on CBS. I want to see the first quarter of that game. And how does Penn State come out? Because they're going to win the game. UCLA is terrible. Penn State's schedule is so terrible, man. It's a bad schedule. And they have not looked good against their schedule. Like, I understand they beat Nevada 46-11, but it took a while for that offense to get clicking. They beat FIU 34-0. It took a while for that offense to get clicking. They beat Villanova 52-6. It took a while for that offense to get clicking. And they won by that much because it's Nevada, Florida International, and Villanova, who's a basketball school. And then they went on a bye week. They have played one decent, let alone good game, decent. They have played one real opponent who has any level of a pulse all year. And it was at home during what is supposed to be their most advantaged situation. Home game at night with everybody wearing white. And they lost. So now they're going to go back to playing dumpster fire teams. And if they look against UCLA in the first quarter and a half, how they looked in the first quarter and a half in the first three games, where it's very clear they're going to win this game, but this is ugly. This is not great. This is not inspiring. That's what leads me to ask, are they good? Because they don't play a team with a pulse again until October 18th. They just played Oregon, lost at home, and now their reward is they get to play UCLA and Northwestern, who are both at the bottom of the conference. They are getting to sleepwalk through the season. So I don't know if they're good or not. I think they are talented, and talent is enough to keep you in games, to Andrew's point, long enough just to lose them by anywhere from 6 to 12 points.
It is very funny that we're saying like Penn State's schedule is not that good, and I don't think you're like necessarily wrong.
And then they're going to come back from the bye week and get smacked in the mouth 2 weeks in a row.
They play, and you could make they're going to play 3 top 10 teams in college football. I feel pretty confident in saying Indiana's in that mix right now. And you could make a case they're going to play the best team in college football on the road. They're going to play the second best team in college football at home, and then they're going to play I don't know, if you were to probably
I put them at
Indiana. I don't think they're going to be at 4 when they play, because I think
probably not. I think is that Indiana game after the Oregon Indiana?
Yeah, but okay, I think Indiana's like a playoff team, so like they're going to play 3 playoff teams and maybe the 2 best teams in the country, and then they got to go to Kinnick.
But I guess when you get to spend 7 of your first 8 games not actually having to prove you are good, I think that's why I think I keep emphasizing the word good. I agree with you guys if you're talking about their talent. They are talented. I don't know if this is a good football team yet. And it's almost the first quarter I'm going to learn a lot for whatever reason about Penn State and whether or not they are good. Because good teams don't just win. They cover.
Like, the thing that is very interesting to me about Penn State this year, and I don't want to go too long about Penn State, but like let's say they get through these next 3 games 3-0, and they beat UCLA, they beat Northwestern, and they beat Iowa, and they roll into Columbus at 6-1. I think we all kind of have a thought about how that's going to go. Like one of my buddies,
I'm 100% positive they're going to beat Iowa. That game is at Iowa. Iowa knows how to drag you down into the mud and make you play Iowa ball.
Sure, but like my point is like James Franklin doesn't lose those games. He loses big games
until you do.
So let's say you lose. Let's just say like history repeats itself and you go 6-1 into Columbus. We all have a way, and like I had friends text me like, how is Penn State going to lose agonizing to Ohio State this time? And I was like, Drew Aller's going to be going in for the game-winning touchdown with a minute left, and he's going to drop the ball before the end zone because he's celebrating. It's going to be a new hilarious way of Penn State losing. But like, if they lose to Ohio State and they lose to Indiana, they're not going to make the playoff. And if this Penn State team doesn't make the playoff, like James Franklin, what do you do? Like, it is a very interesting conversation. So I think you're not off base to say that like this game is very interesting to me, but like this year is a telltale thing for James Franklin because he has to win a big game to make the playoff. Big game James has to win at least one of these 3 between Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana to make the playoff. And that's, like you said, accounting for the fact that he just does what he always does and beats everybody else other than top 10 teams.
All I'm saying is you just said James Franklin doesn't lose these games. Until you lose them, Ryan Day didn't lose to unranked programs. And then he lost to an unranked program, right? The 2 things, the unstoppable force and immovable object collided, and the immovable object moved. He didn't lose to unranked teams, but he also struggled against Michigan. The struggle against Michigan won that battle. Penn State doesn't lose to bad football teams. Iowa's not a bad football team. They're an okay football team who just so happens to not be ranked, so it's not a big game. But the game is on the road. I think, this has turned into a way too long conversation about Penn State for whatever reasons. We've been going 20 minutes. But that's my hope, is I just want to see what Penn State looks like in the first quarter of this game, coming off of what that was last week. Because if they look like what they looked like in the first 3 weeks of the first quarter, where it takes them a quarter to figure it out, I do think that's telling in terms of where Penn State is and how good this team actually is or isn't, and whether or not Andrew is right that we should just be looking at the Ohio State-Penn State game the way we always do, where it'll be close, but Ohio State's going to win. Because it don't got to be close.
Yeah. Give me Penn State 24.5 at UCLA.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't know, man. I might take
UCLA. You know which team I know isn't good?
That's part of the problem.
I'll give you an answer.
Yeah, that's part of the problem here. Is UCLA is just a dumpster fire. Okay, that's enough Penn State talk for a while. I promise you, we're not going to be talking about Penn State again until the week of November 1st. Get the text 614-350-3315. It's a 2-week free trial, $3.99. After that, Ohio State against Minnesota at home on Saturday at night inside of the shoe. For Stefan Krajisnik and Andrew Gillis, I'm Stephen Means. Talk to you guys later.